Good afternoon. You might think that a company founded in 1847, one of the world's oldest companies, would be stodgy and monolithic. You would be wrong. Few companies in the world today can match Siemens for dynamism, leadership, and innovation around the world. Siemens is present in 190 countries, giving it unique and unparalleled insights and understanding into the latest, most important business, social, and economic trends. The breadth of its offerings encompasses energy, transportation, manufacturing, digitization, healthcare, and financial services, and touches almost every aspect of our economy, our businesses, and our lives. With that expansive and deep portfolio, the leader of such a company also holds unique perspectives on what's happening around the world, economically, socially, and politically. We are fortunate today to have with us such a leader. Joe Kaeser is one of the world's most influential CEOs. He has been with Siemens for over 30 years, including a stint in Silicon Valley, and has led the company as CEO for the last 9 years. And under his leadership, Siemens has embarked on a bold Vision 2020 that positions the company to remain nimble, innovative, and successful as the world continues to change. Please join me in welcoming Joe Kaeser.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I come more often because that doesn't happen that often, so thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really great to be back in San Francisco in the Bay Area. I lived here in the 90s from 1994 till 1999. So in 1994, 1999, 1995, the business was not that great in the valley. It was sort of depressed, but something started at the time which then would actually end in 2000, 2001 as what we would now refer to as the so-called dot-com bubble. It was interesting at the time because I was new. Silicon Valley was like the dream, obviously. And I came over and we looked at the next big thing, and Siemens was not exactly well known. Somebody asked me at the time, and I was going to Bay Area Council or other things in San Jose, that, Siemens, are you that mattress company? And I said, well, and then somebody, I will always remember that, somebody at the time said, hey, Siemens, it's that sperm company down in LA, right? And I said, well, actually, not really. But, but if you buy our products and our services, you can sleep really well, better than with that mattress company. So that's what I typically did. It was this made in Germany type of company. We came over and we're trying to find our footprint at the time on semiconductors, but now it's Infineon and telecommunication. And we competed with companies at the time like with Lucent or Nortel or Bain Networks. So they're all gone. If we have kept them, there would not be a Huawei issue now, but things come and go. I'm trying to do today is just introduce Siemens a little bit. We are, while we speak here in that, while we're having lunch in that hour, 385,000 people are doing business in 203 countries in the world. And by the time we are finished with lunch, they made about 55 million revenues all over the world. So it's a big company. And Siemens United States is our single biggest Siemens market, about $20+ billion. Number 2 is China. So if anyone believes somebody is in the middle of a storm, tell me about it. So we'll see how it's going to be. Now, obviously, what was the thing which impressed me the most when I was here at the Silicon Valley? It was something which I believe you are very, very well advised to continue today, and that is, if you are down on your knees, you stand up and try again, just harder. And this mindset has never been as important as it is today. We are in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution. Some people call it the Internet of Things. Others call it Industry 4.0. There might be other names to that. It's the fourth industrial revolution. Now the good news is all three others industrial revolutions made the world a better place. Hundreds of millions of people got out of poverty, and it was a good thing after all. So chances are that the fourth industrial revolution is going to be another thing, big thing, to get people out of poverty. However, there might also be downsides. The upside is that technology enables us to do things differently as we used to do them. That's the big upside. Technology is there, but what actually happens in the fourth industrial revolution is that the internet reaches the industrial world. That's what it does. And the internet cuts out the middleman. It cuts out the weakest links of the value chain. So inevitably, it is causing a massive societal challenge to integrate the winners and the losers of a binary digital movement. That's what the matter is all about. And governments are not exactly prepared for this. The rules, the regulations, the resources are confined to national borders. Of course they are, because this is what a government and an integrity is all about. So the question is, in fact, how should global companies deal with that matter? How should they actually reach out and integrate and work above and beyond national boundaries? And the jury is still out on how this is going to go. If you look at the trade wars today, if you look at nationalism, if you look at unilateral deals, that's exactly the opposite of what is going to be the fourth industrial revolution, which is boundaryless. The bits and bytes, the data are flowing over any wall you may want to build. So the question is, how are we going to integrate this? The United States is still the world's largest economy. It's been the strongest proponent of free trade. And California, obviously, as the governor impressively said today, is on the forefront of innovation. But the world is unfortunately not a Silicon Valley. So the question is, how are we going to deal with the old world and the new world? How are we going to deal with those ones who also want a piece of the pie, meaning the developing economies? Europe, the European Union is busy with itself. Very busy. I mean, really busy. I know they are now have been electing a new European government, but the jury is still out. So in the end of the day, the question is, what is the United States going to do to lead the world in economic development and also in the fourth industrial revolution? Because obviously Asia and all above China has quite an economic momentum, a lot of self-confidence. 2/3 of global population live in Asia. Now it's great to have 350 million people who are leading the world, and maybe another 500 in Europe if they find together. But that's only 10% of what we actually have. So the question is, how are we going to deal with that? And China, obviously, is a regulated system. It's a government-driven capitalist economy. Government-driven capitalist economy. And this One Belt, One Road, what they have been doing, now contains 125 different countries with 65% of the global population. So whether we like it or not, this is going to be a power play for number one spot in the global economy. And so the question is, how will global companies deal with that, and how is that going to work? Well, I believe companies need to have a purpose. They need to serve society, and they need to be integrative of societal and economic boundaries. And this is important. So the question is, for us as companies, leading companies in the world, in California, and they have world-leading companies. So the question is the business of business business? Likely yes. There's a Nobel Prize winner in the 70s who said, business of business is business and you better stay out of it, everything else. So the question is, in the fourth industrial revolution, where society is naturally being divided further, as we see already today, is the business of business still business? Or is maybe the business of business serving society, integrating the rich and the poor, standing up and taking shape of what needs to happen in the global economy? Or should we leave it up to political matters? I believe, and that's what Siemens now is doing, we believe the business of business is serving society. If we have the aspiration to know better than the society does, we have an obligation to stand up and try to shape the world if it comes to industrial development. We need to do that. It's our responsibility. And I tell you what, most of the shareholders I'm talking to are not those ones anymore who go for the short money. Some may, naturally may, because obviously shareholders own the company. But if you are a free-flow company, and if you compare yourself with a company which is owned by an owner, a family business, small business, you know what do those small businesses do? They typically got it from their parents, or they founded it themselves. So they own the business by reputation, by money. So what is their natural desire? The natural desire is to give that away to the next generation in good shape, preferably in a better shape than you've got it from your parents, or in a better shape and you founded it and went through the rough time of making a company big. So ownership, sustainability, responsibility is a natural component of an ownership culture. Now, if you look at a publicly traded company, like Siemens, 90% free float. Shareholders own the company, by definition. But then, what is the purpose of the shareholder? If you assume that the shareholders are professional funds. Well, the purpose of that shareholder, of that ownership, becomes a tool to serve a different purpose. And that's making the money for the investors. So the question is, who actually is responsible for long-term sustainable development, for social responsibility, for being inclusive of capitalism? Who is that? The fund managers? No, they can't, because they're going to lose their job if they underperform the index. So you've got to have somebody to stand up and say, this is where we are going. Today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. And if you look at all those constituencies who actually could do this, governments, science, entrepreneurs, the ones who deserve the word entrepreneurs because they act like it, who should that be? It's got to be those companies who are above and beyond national boundaries, who have a view about Asia, who have a view about their home, who have a view about the United States and Europe and Latin America, bringing together the cultures, be one notch above national boundaries, and integrate society in the end. So at the end of the day, the fourth industrial revolution is not so much about a matter of technology. We have so many smart people, especially here in this place between San Francisco and probably in the meantime even Gilroy, who can do that for us. That's not the point. Technology is there. But a responsible use of technology to serve society in the long term and integrate the differences and the issues we have by a dividing world, that's our responsibility. So the single biggest task of entrepreneurial vision and entrepreneurial responsibility is to make sure that people understand where we are going. Because people, if people don't understand where we are going, and not everybody is a software engineer, a brainy sort of STEM person, if you don't explain to people where we are going to have a lot of cars on the street, but they're not self-driving, they're burning. So what I'm trying to tell you today as the Chief Entertainment Officer of a company which does business in 203 countries in the world, and people tell me only the Catholic Church at the FIFA have more people, so I'm not sure whether this is good or bad, but leave it that way. I'm telling you today as one of the servers of this company who's been in so many different countries, in so many different cultures. For us, diversity is not a task. That's something which is there every day. But the task we have is to include society. The task we have is to include national interests all over the world because, ladies and gentlemen, we have more to lose than an election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe, for that global tour and perspective. You talked about being in the middle of the storm with the ongoing trade tensions, and I'm just wondering how you see those playing out and what the implications are for global companies and nations.
Well, I mean, look, I'm not in politics, and I shouldn't be, and I'm glad I have a somewhat meaningful job. So therefore, the answer is I don't know. I mean, obviously, you know, if you run a company together with a team, and those two countries which are, you know, let's say, being the main actor, is your number one and your number two country, it obviously matters. Now, we're not going to change approaches to that, and there's a lot at stake. The United States has been by far, and will certainly be for quite some time, the most powerful nation in the world in all aspects. Now, in economic terms, China is obviously targeting to become the number one in the world. Right or wrong, it's just a matter probably of time because of 1,400 million people providing quite a scalability of technology and other things. And there is a state-directed, government-directed capitalist approach which makes it, as if it stands, if it's sustainable, may or may not be sustainable. Look at Hong Kong today, so you see the downsides of such a combination of policy. You know, it's probably only a matter of time. So that basically means that we would likely see that tension going on for quite some time. So what can big companies do which are affected naturally? Well, you need to localize. You know, you localize your innovation and your manufacturing so that you do local for local, and then have unilateral agreements following the political trend of unilateral agreements by doing unilateral business and try to optimize your value chain by that. Is that perfect? Is that what you would typically like? Well, probably not, because what you like is you would like to have an environment, a level playing field, where the best team may win. Mm-hmm. So if the Raiders play the 49ers, you don't want, you know, the Raiders have a big block on their back because otherwise the Niners never going to win. So you want to have a level playing field. And that's what you wish, and then, you know, this is about innovation and all the good stuff like customer proximity and what have you. But we need to deal with the world as it is, and so therefore, obviously localization is key, and I'll take it from there.
You have a global perspective, but you also know California from the time you spent here. In the context of what's going on globally today, what role do you see for California? How should we think about our future?
Well, look, I mean, the governor said it today, and this was not just a pro domo. I mean, California is the fifth biggest economy in the world. Probably, I don't know, it's probably politically totally incorrect, but hypothetically, if I said now that, you know, California would be better off without the rest, hypothetically, I'm not saying it, but hypothetically, probably it's true. but as I said, I'm not saying it because this is a matter of the American people and not somebody who lives in an ivory tower in Munich. But I think the point is, what you see is if you look at California and innovation, the pace, the mindset. I was at a Stanford shopping center yesterday because I had the family here, and so we needed to kill time between the time you arrived and the time we had dinner. And I mean, you go through that Stanford shopping center, and it's like you meet the world. I mean, most of the students are gone, but like you meet the world. You look at the audience here, you meet the world. It's not like in Germany where you have an audience and you have those great-looking old white male with gray suits everywhere. It's just different. It is very hard to compare. The challenge, I think, is, California is so, and especially Silicon Valley, is so far ahead of the rest of the world that they run the risk that regulators step in and correct the pace of innovation. So I think everybody is well advised here in this great state to be mindful about regulatory issues they may cause. And before they cause them, they better make sure that it's well understood what benefit they contribute to society.
That's well said. And let the record show that Joe's speculation about California's political future was purely hypothetical. You talked eloquently about the obligation of business to society to make a difference, and also about the imperative for a global company to localize. What else are you leading Siemens in doing in the Vision 2020 and other initiatives?
Well, I mean, when I took over, there was this Vision 2020. We said by the year 2020, we need to be number one or number two in all our businesses. So we made that one through ahead of time. So we were sort of done with that strategic concept in 2018, like last year. And then the question was, are we just going to rest on our laurels till 2020 and have fun and drink and smoke and have a good time? Or should we actually take this position of strength against our competition, like other companies? And then we decided for the latter and said, I want this company to survive another 170 years, and it's not going to be, this company again in the future. So we went and sat together with the management team, and we called it those pullover workshops where we go out and casually talk about stuff, and then we came up with what we called the Vision 2020 Plus, and the underlying scheme was a conglomerate of traditional style is not going to survive the next generation. That was the hypothesis. Because a conglomerate which has gas turbines which are bigger than a 747, circuit breakers, the best of all medical scanners, I hope Bernard agrees to that, MRIs and CTs, and have software. We have 35,000 software engineers which do simulation for manufacturing automation and product lifecycle management. If you do everything at the same time, at the same speed, you're going to fail. Because for some of those businesses, you're way too fast. For others, you're way too slow. So what you tend to do is you cut it to an average, and everybody is badly served. Because the small ones the slow ones are still struggling, and the fast ones are being held back in their competition. So we decided to create 3 Siemens companies: Siemens Healthcare, Siemens Industrial, and Siemens Power and Energy. And that's the cornerstone of the Vision 2020 Plus. So scope or focus matters more than scale, and decisiveness and proximity to customers and technology matters more than being big. If you have those 3 companies, all 3 of them will likely be in the German DAX, maybe even in the Euro stocks. So you see, there's nothing wrong with having strong companies instead of one big one.
And as you go forward, who do you see as the competition for Siemens?
Well, I mean, it's, I'd rather talk about my customers and listen to them, or technology, or what gets me excited or keeps me up at night. Not so much about competition, because they have their own thing. But on a general note, talking about general, I don't know why General G comes into my mind. Used to be a very big competitor of us, and if you look at the case there, I think you can see what happens if you get defocused. In General Electric, which is still, I believe, a very, very strong company. I mean, in my almost 40 years at Siemens, 38 years or 36 years, people were telling me, hey, this is how you should do it. Look at them. They are so good. Why don't you do this like that? So all the time, it was like, oh my God, And today, my people say, well, we're finally, doing better. This isn't that great. I said, you folks, you take your head down. You take your head down. You focus on what you do. Don't talk to other people's issues. Make sure that you're never going to get into that situation. So learn from that and move on. But what I'm trying to say is the new competition in the new industrial world is not going to be ABB or Honeywell or GE or all those great companies. They are going to be different ones. They are going to come in, they break the value chain, change the business model, cut the middleman out, and provide a better business model. Think about the Amazon matter when it started. It was nothing but cutting out the middleman, which happened to be the bookstores. So that's what happens to the industrial value chain. So you better be mindful. So message number one is the traditional competitors are not the ones which will actually be an issue in the future. It's going to be software companies coming in through the IoT, the Internet of Things, matter from the software. They're cutting out inefficient processes in the hardware piece, and then this is how they're going to go about it. So watch out, not in the traditional space, watch out in the Alphabet, Microsoft sort of environment, the ones who've been there already in the enterprise environment. Secondly, make sure that you understand the connectivity between hardware and software. Understand the connectivity between the real world of manufacturing, of engineering, and the virtual world of where you build a digital twin, optimize the process, the service, the product, and bring it back into the real world of manufacturing, because this is where the customer benefit happens. So that's our mantra. That's how we see the world in the next 10 years, and everything else we can talk again in 5 years.
You mentioned Amazon. Amazon was founded when you were in Silicon Valley many years ago. Back then a small attacker, now a big company. Many of the companies that were startups in Silicon Valley are now large companies, and there are cries across the political spectrum for more regulation or to break them up. How do you think about the obligation of those large technology companies in the more populist context today?
Well, I mean, I think it's very advisable to know all the facts before one does a judgment on it. I mean, obviously, this whole fourth industrial revolution, the Internet of Things, there is a lot about data. Where do you get the data from? Who owns the data? How can we secure free flow of data? How can we protect our data? What is of national interest, like critical infrastructure? What should be in private interest? There's a lot of questions to be done. But I think what we ought to do with those bigger data companies like Facebook and Google and the likes, we need to find a way not to slam them because they are too good, but to make them transparent in terms of what is the purpose of data going to be. So I think we need to have a sort of I would call it the integrity of the intent. So I think we should not break up companies who are really good or which are really good and innovative and strong and show the way how things should be by creating jobs and paying taxes, I think we should make sure that there's enough transparency so that people can make choices. So what do I mean with that integrity of intent? If you use the internet and you literally give data away, right? Or you send some photos somewhere, which you probably regret once you become an adult, but whatever. Doesn't matter. Or maybe not. I don't know. But by the time you provide that data, you ought to know where this data goes and what is it used for. And then you can make a decision whether or not you want this or not. So at the end of the day, I would not promote a breakup of those data companies, which I believe would probably be unfair if it's just because they're good. However, I would make them be transparent about the intent of what they do with the data. And so at the end of the day, you may end up with two internets. One internet, which you pay the access for money, like, I don't know, $30 a month or 50 or whatever. And the other internet where you pay with your privacy. And then you have choices. And then and I think that's what we ought to do, the integrity of intent. And then it should be actually okay.
The G20 meets next week. What would be useful outcomes from those discussions for the global economy?
On G20? Well, I think we are well advised to set the expectations low, because then there is mostly only upside. I would actually, having said that, I would actually say, if at the G20, if people talk to each other instead of about each other, that would already be a big advantage.
Thank you, Joe. And perhaps in conclusion, we are almost at 2020, and you opened by talking about the fourth industrial revolution. Fast forward 10 years. So let's say we're here in 2030. What are one or two predictions you would have about the world in 2030?
By 2030, we need to have at least another 500 million people out of poverty. If we cannot do this, the industrial digitalization has failed as such that we created even more societal divide, and there will be a lot of people on the street, and that's not a good thing.
Thank you, Joe. On that inspiring note, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.